To kick off, we are in a digital age. That means everything is expected immediately. I want to be satisfied wherever I am. This is whether I'm a consumer or in B2B. It's on demand, it's constant, and technology is the foundation of enabling this constant change in digital age. So we're seeing what we call the democratization through digitization and digitalization. So we talk about the 5 Ds, and different countries, different economies are different phases in that, going through the 5 Ds, and also different sectors are part of that. But what we're basically seeing is this significant shift in the way that we consider business and investment and trade being driven through digital. So what is this really all about? It's about future-proofing ourselves, our communities, our businesses, our countries, our regions, and our continent. For me, change the dynamic, change the game. This is critical, and this is the motto I've been kind of living by for the last few years, and what I'm really seeing happening in the continent. So I want to talk about a couple of things today. I'm talking about opportunity versus capital. I'm talking about the changing value equation that we're seeing in the relation dynamics in the traditional value chains and global value chains from producer, distributor, supplier, retail, and consumer, as well as the shifts in leadership and mental models. So I come from a background ex-Deloitte for the last 10 years. Just a correction there, I wasn't leading Deloitte in South Africa, but I was heading up strategy and operations for the consumer industry across sub-Saharan Africa. And I was working with all our counterparts across FMCG, retail, manufacturing, and through that got involved with WEF, UN, WTO, AU, and local organizations also. And for the past 4 years, I have recently stepped down. I was also chairman of the board of the African E-commerce Forum, where we're promoting a digital-led economy for the African continent. Through that, we are part of an advisory board representing Africa and making submissions to the WTO trade negotiations, specifically around digital trade and what that means for the private sector. So my passion is leadership and youth development in Africa. It's also around trade and investments, that's both inbound and outbound, and then specifically the growth and development of the digital economy. So not long ago, about 2 years ago, I was in Geneva, and I was very privileged to be invited by the UN Economic Commission to present at the World Investment Forum. And in that 3-day session, I got to meet the most incredible people and have amazing conversations. I was on a panel with Alibaba, with Vertex Holdings, the most active VC in the world, with Imyada, which is Impact Fund out of eBay, as well as other venture capitalists from the US and Africa. And one of the key things that really stood out for me, and something that we raised in an investment forum lunch together with the World Bank, was that we need a paradigm shift in how we consider capital and opportunity relationship dynamics, specifically because of traditional global South, global North legacies. What does this mean? Well, what we saw and what I was seeing is around this legacy relationship that is existing in continent when it comes to capital and opportunity. I've also been in the US working with entrepreneurs. A week ago, I was sitting on an investor panel with entrepreneurs pitching from Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And still, it's the same challenge I'm seeing coming through. There's still an approach to the attraction of capital from a donor-based mindset. What does that mean? That means that I see incredible talent and opportunity and ideas happening in continent, but the way that we are articulating our attraction of capital is still based on a less purely commercial and more impact. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a huge role to play in impact, but the traditional means for capital to find opportunity has been around the commercial side of things. So there's two sides to this relationship, the capital and opportunity. So I'm challenging us from what we can do in continent, from articulation of the opportunity, and then we've got to look at the capital side. So it's a great statement that when I was talking to a Minister of Trade in Geneva, he said, Dylan, I know that you're focusing on Africa, But this is the reality. The continent is competing with the rest of the world for global capital flows, and capital flows towards opportunity. So it's a competition for opportunity to create the best value proposition to attract that capital. Okay, now we need to relook. What do we do? How do we consider that? So we need a narrative change. We need to encourage ourselves to move beyond this thinking that is unfortunately based in legacy colonial structures around the relationship with capital, of donor relationship, to empowering ourselves towards a commercial return on investment narrative. From the capital side, however, global capital has traditionally looked at opportunity based on strict criteria, historical criteria, the new age, the new normal, the digital era, and the opportunities in Africa don't have that same historical information. So as an example, the data, you might not have data sets for a business over 15 years that you can put together in creating an articulated value proposition to attract capital. Capital needs to rethink that, or they're going to lose out on the opportunities that are on continents. Public-private partnerships are critical to this. So government needs to help in creating that enabling environment for the attraction of capital and for opportunity to be able to properly articulate itself and have access to the platforms where it can present those opportunities. And I think that is significant, and we are seeing changes happening, and which is, for me, amazing. The other thing, though, that is also quite interesting is when I look at, so I was just reading the 2 venture capital reports for Africa and South Africa last week. And traditionally, we've always associated investments in continents around infrastructure development or resource-based. There are, of course, opportunities still existing in those sectors. However, we're seeing a shift away from a resource dependency when it comes to capital flows. This also talks to the growth of the digital economy and how that is filtering down into the continent for opportunities in digital economy, e-commerce, ed tech, agri-tech, fintech, legal tech, and how we can now leverage that to scale not only in country, but across region and continent, and take that opportunity to the rest of the world. So we're seeing a resource focus shift. The question is, can capital, international capital, adjust enough from a traditional view around how to invest in resources, moving towards digital economy investments? Part of the leadership paradigm that I talked about is fundamental to this. And this is a quote that I absolutely love. It's from Flight of the Buffalo, written in 1994, which if you haven't read, I highly suggest giving a read. It's a very quick read. It says, change is hard because people overestimate the value of what they have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. That is significant. I've seen this time and time again with the leaders of companies and with government officials basing decisions on individual paradigms. So we talk about navel gazing, we talk about myopic points of view. This is a significant challenge, and it's often fear-based because we only know what we've gone through, and we're fearful of a future that we don't know. However, we need to challenge ourselves in the way that we make decisions going forward, and not depend on fear and based on narratives and paradigms that are quite narrow. That encourages us to change our worldview and talks to considering ourselves in a global competitive landscape and a systems thinking approach. And I'll show something just now that really talks to this. So talking about this leadership, and this is the digital paradigm for me, which is absolutely brilliant. And it talks about achieving digital maturity. It is an MIT Sloan and Deloitte report, but it talks to how we are still challenged in adapting to the new normal of digital. Now we can also talk about the new normal of this global pandemic and how that has also brought the future forward by 5 to 10 years. So our adaptability and willingness to adapt has to be accelerated. So 80% of executives believe digital will disrupt their industry. However, the number of those individuals that believe it and actually acting on it is significantly smaller. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that 80% of these organizations don't have the right leaders to transform the digital mindset of the company. That 6 times those leaders are not getting the new digital skills they need within the organization that are going to maintain longevity in the organization because they are not giving them what they need.